You're listening to Anywhere But Hollywood with Adam Campbell, empowering the independent filmmaker.
Today I have as my guest Maria Alexander, author and screenwriter. She's just had her debut novel, Mr. Wicker, published and has been receiving very positive reviews for it. This one's from Publishers Weekly. Convincing in its haunting whimsy, Alexander's emotionally complex fairy tale comments on grim reality with chilling metaphors. Mr. Wicker himself, the character, is an enigmatic being who resides in a world beyond death. He's the librarian of lost childhood memories. The book is a dark urban fantasy with fairy tale elements and a compelling heroine in Alicia Baum, who encounters Mr. Wicker after an attempted suicide. In this conversation, we talk about Mr. Wicker's long journey from novella to screenplay to novel. We talk about the challenges of working through this same story in different media, what works in a screenplay versus what works in a novel, what she would do even if she were to convert it back to a screenplay. Lots of really good stuff here. So let's get into it. This is my conversation with Maria Alexander. Of course, we're going to be kind of dancing around this because we don't want to get into spoilers, too much, obviously.
Right.
But why don't you just talk a little bit about you and your background, and a little bit about the genesis of this story.
Let's see. So I got interested in writing. I'd been writing for games for a lot of years, starting in 1988.
Whoa.
I think it was. 88 or 89, we started Debtors Productions, which was a live-action role-playing game company that ran these totally immersive, like a holodeck games, a Lovecraftian horror up in the Bay Area. And a friend of ours who was an AD on a lot of movies, who was living up in San Francisco at the time, he said, "Hey, would you write a movie for me?" And I'm doing this Forrest J. Ackerman anthology, and we just need one more. Or he had a friend who was doing it, who was a producer doing the anthology. And he asked me to produce one more story, so we have 3. So would you write something for me? I know that you can do something low budget because I've seen you create amazing stories in like a limited space with limited characters. I said, okay. So that's when I got interested in screenwriting, and I mean, my very first script was produced, which was just totally magical, right? But
can you say what that was called?
It was called The Dark Site.
The Dark Fight with an F?
The Dark Site. The Dark Site.
Site with an S, like S as in Sam.
Yes, S as in Sam, as in seeing, as in the eyeballs.
Right, got it.
So The Dark Site, which was this half-hour Lovecraftian pastiche piece, and it wound up never getting out there. The producer who was putting together the Forrest J. Ackerman anthology, the direct-to-video anthology, just never got his act together, and it all fell apart. And when I finally met Forrest J. Ackerman many years later, he was really pissed at this guy. He had never forgiven him for wasting all his time. And, yeah. So anyway, but it kind of started there, and I knew immediately that I loved screenwriting. So I started, and really pretty soon thereafter, it was like a couple of years later at the most, maybe a year later, I got into this. I did this film seminar called Flash Forward, and I think that's where you and I met.
Is that where we met? I was wondering where we met.
Yeah.
I could not place it.
Yeah.
That was it. Okay.
Yeah, we met in Flash Forward, and part of Flash Forward was you had to get a film mentor. And I tried really hard throughout the whole seminar to get a mentor, and nobody, because my very first choice was Clive Barker, and nobody answered my letters, and he was the only one who answered, his assistant, and his assistant said, "Well, sorry, Clive is writing a book." But I convinced Clive to be my mentor. Shortly after that, it was a week before Halloween, and I was still up in San Francisco, and I walked into a shop, a big Halloween store there, and I found this rubber ball made up of fingers pointing outward. It was super creepy. So I bought it, and I wrapped it in blood red tissue, and I put it in a box with a little card, a little fairy on it. And the inside I wrote, "Dear Clive, please be my film mentor and point the way." and I signed it, and I said, "P.S. That is when you're able." And I sent that off, and that actually arrived in his studio on Halloween.
Nice.
And on November 1st, I got a call from his assistant saying, "Clive's agreed to be your mentor."
How perfect. Oh, wow.
It was just so awesome, just off the charts awesome. So we did that, and he did a little more than was required of him. He actually said yes before he even knew what was required of him. I could have just rewritten the whole program. But I didn't.
It's like, I've got him now. What can we do?
Wow, but no, I stuck to the program, and he did more. One of our conversations on the phone was hilarious because actually Chris Carter was sitting in the background.
Wait, X-Files?
Dying. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
okay.
I was dying. I'm like, can you hear me? But I just knew I wanted to be a screenwriter, and as you know, but the listeners don't know, I got to LA, and the first thing that happened was I hurt my hands with like major carpal tunnel disability, and I continued writing with voice technology, but I didn't have. But I was still writing screenplays, but it really wasn't too much longer after that. So I just went, no, I just do not like this industry. It's just not for me. But I did persist for a little while, and I wrote Mr. Wicker. First, it was a short story. Actually, it was a really long short story. It was like 10,000 words. And one of the people to read it and give me feedback, the very first person actually was Neil Gaiman, because he was giving me feedback at that time on my stories. And he was, it was very, you could call it a mentorship, but it was very informal. It was like more like just friends, you know. And so he gave me some input that just totally changed things up for me, but I didn't want to do that in the story. I said, you know what, this really needs to be a screenplay. And so I adapted it to screenplay, and I really, it made a much bigger story. I brought in Dr. Farron, who was not part of the original short story, and that whole story there, the romance and all of that was not in the original short story. Because what Neil said was, he said, this is an adult fairy tale. And basically, Alicia needs to see Mr. Wicker 3 times.
Right. I saw you said that in the acknowledgments.
Yeah.
Right.
And that changed everything. And I realized in order for her to see Mr. Wicker a 3rd time, it had to be a much bigger story.
Right.
And so I saved that for the screenplay. I didn't try to rewrite the story.
Is that the biggest? Obviously the addition of Dr. Farron. And what can you compare a little bit the original story to to the final story?
The short story?
Yeah, the original short story
book?
to let's say short story to screenplay, and then we'll go from screenplay to book.
Okay,
without getting too much into spoilers, if you can.
Okay. The difference between the short story and the screenplay was, in the short story, Alicia she pretty much almost immediately comes back home after it's no secret. In the first paragraph, she kills herself.
Wrists, right?
Yeah, she slits her wrists, and she has this, and and then beyond death, she has this encounter with Mr. Wicker in the Library of Lost Childhood Memories. And similarly to the book, in the first chapter, he tells her about that she left these deadly memories with him when she was a child, and that they're the reason for all of her misery and all that. And she doesn't believe him, and then she comes back, and he has her saved. And so, but in the short story, she just goes back home and has a few therapy sessions, and and she sees Mr. Wicker one more time after that. But in the screenplay, I realized as I started to research mental health and like procedures in California, and also I realized that they would not have just let her go home. Right. She would be in a lockdown at least for 24 hours. And depending on how she fared those first 24 hours, then they might let her go home, or they'd keep her the full 72, just again, depending on her behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized that was really an opportunity for a lot more interaction. And this whole idea of Dr. Farron and, the guy who's doing research on a phenomenon called Mr. Wicker,
mm-hmm.
That developed.
Which has a very Clive Barker kind of feel to it as well. That, a little bit like Candyman, the concept of this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, actually, Mr. Wicker is, if Neil and Clive and I had a threesome, Mr. Wicker would be the love child.
Right.
That's how I describe this book. It's really.
That's a very good description.
That's really it. And Tim Powers would be the godfather of that love child. I think I'll just throw that out there.
I have to tell you, and I don't know if you hate him, this actor, or not, but maybe it was because I just watched a movie with him last week, but all through the book, right? I forgot what I was reading. Right, it was a book. All through the book, I kept on picturing as Dr. Farron Lee Pace. Do you know who he is?
Oh, I love him. Yes.
That's exactly who I kept picturing all through it.
Yes. I mean, actually, when I wrote the screenplay, I was picturing John Cusack.
Oh yeah, I could. And I just watched 1408 just before that.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
But now I think Lee Pace would be an absolute perfect Dr. Farron.
That's who I kept saying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love him. I finally saw him in what was it, The Fall.
Right? Isn't that a great movie? I love that movie.
Brett made me watch it a couple months ago, and I was just like, "Oh my god!"
And no CG.
No CG, and it's just can I swear on this?
Well, I should warn you that I bleep all swears with a Wilhelm scream.
Okay, it tore my heart out, that movie, The Fall, and I just cried and cried.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so beautiful, and Lee Pace would definitely. I think when Brett hears this, he's going to laugh so hard because he saw how I reacted to Lee Pace, and he tried to get me to watch Pushing Daisies, and I got through one episode of Pushing Daisies, and I went, "This might be too cute for me."
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you like Pushing Daisies, because I can see that being a little too cutesy for you, but I like it.
Yeah.
So let's get back on track here. So,
okay.
All right. So you then continue where you want. Go ahead.
Okay. So the relationship with Dr. Farron, somebody sort of from the clinical aspect coming in and looking at the situation and having some kind of relationship with Alicia, that was new to the script. That felt very organic, and let's see. And so I think that's kind of all the stuff that got added. And when I went from the script to the book, it was in the process after I had pitched the movie a number of times. I'd gotten a lot of meetings from that script,
and you did well in the Nickel with that too, the Nickel Fellowship.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and so I got a lot of meetings and talked to a lot of people who just did not understand the phrase urban fantasy did not exist in 1999. Nobody knew what that was. They knew Tim Burton,
right?
But this idea, and they understood Clive Barker, but they did not understand that you could have something that was sort of magical and fantastical and dark, but not, where everybody's bleeding all over the floor every 5 minutes. They didn't quite understand that. Or that was cartoony.
Or something, I guess until like Pan's Labyrinth came along or something like that people started to see the possibilities in these darker fairy tales.
Yes, exactly. So back then I wasn't getting traction. So I started, as I started pitching it, I started thinking about it, and then I started thinking about the book. I started to see a lot of similarities between Mr. Wicker and The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Ah. Yeah.
And
well, I was seeing The Phantom of the Opera, but I can totally see The Hunchback of Notre Dame, too.
Yeah, the opera, too. Yeah, there's definitely that as well. And so that's where we get the character of Dr. Sark.
Oh, right. The what's his name? I forgot his name, but the bad guy from The Hunchback.
The bad guy.
The bishop or whatever he was, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And so this is where I started feeling, and Dr. Stark sort of just jumped out of nowhere. But then I realized, no, he didn't jump out of nowhere. It's because of these classic stories that I've read, watched, embraced in my subconscious.
Right. And truly, there's no other real antagonist in the story, especially in your revised version, with the different ending.
Right. And I just felt like, well, in the story, I think ever since the beginning, I never really saw Mr. Wicker as a bad guy.
Right.
The whole story to me had always felt very Miyazaki, even before I'd ever seen a Miyazaki movie. Mm-hmm. I kept thinking that there's got to be a way to tell a story where people simply have conflicting desires.
Right.
And where nobody is actually a bad guy. They just,
This is why we love showing Miyazaki movies to Luna, our daughter, because they're just like, these girls are just strong characters. I mean, when they're girls.
Oh my God.
And there's no like evil stepmother. There's no evil. Well, there are witches, but they're not like the traditional Disney evil witch.
That is that's always what it's felt like. Mm-hmm. This story in particular, and I've certainly written a lot of stories that were not like this. This one just felt very special and very different from the other kinds of stories that I was writing. So, but yes, it felt like there needed to be this anchor. I don't want to say anchor; that's not a good word, but there needed to be this very concrete villain, this very bad person, who we weren't sure just how bad he's going to get. Mm-hmm. We hear rumors, we know he behaves badly, but we don't know. We don't know if he's really going to be incredibly bad, or if he's going to be like, what is he going to do? If he's a total loose cannon because he's a total sociopath,
right?
So that felt like a necessary part of it, and really, the opportunity to get in the book, to get into one of the other notes that came out of all those meetings was every single person I talked to said, I want to know more about Mr. Wicker, and I want to see more of Mr. Wicker.
Right.
I'm like, well, he's freaking stuck in a library, this supernatural.
We're talking about the screenplay
prison.
now. So we're clear. You're talking about meetings on the screenplay, right?
Yeah, they were talking to us about the screenplay.
Because you only had, in the screenplay, you only had like about 5 minutes worth of stuff in the past, right?
It's like this really brief thing, and it's not even very well developed. It was just sort of this like, oh, I did this bad thing, so now I'm punished for it. And people really wanted to see more of him. They wanted to have more of his world. They wanted to understand him better. They wanted all this stuff that part of me was like you and I had talked about the script, about mystery.
Right.
And preserving mystery. And in fact, I have you to thank for encouraging me to hold back on what exactly had sent Alicia over the edge until the midpoint.
I don't remember saying that, but thank you.
You did. Well, you told me don't reveal it right away.
Oh, okay.
Keep it under wraps for a while, and then I realized that felt right. That note really resonated, and I thought, you know what, that is actually the perfect time to drop all that is in the middle of the book.
Right.
Because everything opens up. Everybody opens up. I have to tell you,
I felt like it was all beautifully written, and it was compelling all the way through. But it felt to me like a switch got flipped at the midpoint. And
as it should.
Yeah, and it's just the flashback stuff was great and compelling, and all of a sudden opened it up to a whole new world. But not only that, but I thought your writing also got a little more whimsical from that point on too. And and the whole thing just kind of felt like it had the booster rocket kicked in, and it took care of you all the way through to the ending. It was great.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad it worked for you, because I mean, the process of writing that backstory. So that was another huge challenge, was writing that backstory for Mr. Wicker, because all I knew at first was that it had to take place during that he had been a Gaul. Mm-hmm. That's all I kind of really knew, and that he had some connection with the Druids. And you know, and I don't want to say anything else
Right.
really.
I know it's
but,
tempting to talk about it, but well, what now? So much of it, there was in the acknowledgments. You had thanked somebody about the research. Can you tell me a little bit about the research behind this?
Yeah, you know, I had an idea. I knew pretty much what I wanted to write, but it was vague because I wanted reality to inform the story a lot more than I didn't want it to just be my invention, like backed up with a few historical details. I wanted it to feel very historical. I wanted it to be completely infused.
Oh, and let me interrupt 1 second. To be clear, now we're talking about going from screenplay to novel.
Yes, now going screenplay to novel.
Right.
So that little bitty bit of something that was in the screenplay, that's like I guess I don't even remember now what he supposedly did wrong. You know,
Well, it wasn't nearly as strong in the screenplay. You know, it was. I can't even remember now either, but because I read it very quickly. But I was kind of comparing it what I read, and it was just you didn't have that whole tragedy behind it. You didn't have he wasn't traded to the other team. You know, he wasn't. Was. I don't recall that he was even a scribe, really, like writing stuff. But I may be wrong about that.
Not. He had stolen something or other, and now he had to. I don't know. It was not very good. Yeah. It was not very good. Bottom line.
Okay.
And so, as I started to develop it, I realized that there was, you know, given the time period, there was potential for this really dramatic, really intense storyline from his past, and a way to connect him with Alicia and Dr. Farron and all these characters, you know, because of his past and who he is. And I started to research it, but I really was hitting a lot of walls because I wanted some very specific information. And I went to the UCLA library and I started just, you know, digging through scholarly journals, and I found a couple of articles by the same fellow. His name was Dr. James Moscovich, and he was teaching at the University of Ottawa, or Western University of Ottawa. And I was just so thrilled that here was somebody who knew, you know, exactly what I was talking about and what I was trying to write about. I'm very excited, and I went home and I found him online. And I sent him an email, and I told him who I was and what I was trying to do, and just bless his heart, he just took me under his wing and made me one of his students. Oh. And he later told me that he now considered me one of his students.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart. And so
So this is a bunch of emails going back and forth?
This is a bunch of emails, and he gave me a ton of references to go find. So I went to the Los Angeles library downtown, the big one, the several stories tall one, and just went crazy in there and got some books I would have never found on my own. Maybe possibly a librarian, but the thing is like, you know, the librarian can help you find books, but a scholar knows which ones are crap and which ones are, you know, legit.
Right.
So he told me which ones were as legit as he could, because there's not been a lot of really good information about the Gauls in particular. So, but he was able to get me some fantastic information, and so I read everything. I just really absorbed it, and then I went on and I wrote that back history.
Well, see, that stuff was so compelling. I almost wanted to see more even in that, you know, or I'd almost like to see a companion volume about that period.
Yeah, because it's a very, very powerful period. It's really the turning point in European history. So anyway, it's a huge turning point. So anyway, Dr. Moscovich, after I was done writing it, he offered to read it. And so he read it, and he didn't give me very many notes.
Did he read the whole book, or just that section?
Just that section. Just the and he read that plus the extra bit toward the end, and he read it all, and he gave me a couple of notes, and not a lot, but enough, you know. And there was where there's this one character, there's no way he would have been in that part of the country at that time. But I was kind of like, this is the one rule I'm going to bend.
Okay.
Everything else is ridiculously accurate. This part, this one little thing, I'm going to, maybe he wouldn't have been there, but, you know, I wouldn't have been that bit of reality.
Yeah.
So, once I got pretty much his blessing or his input on it, and he just really liked it, you know, I just said, okay.
So how long did it take you to write this novel?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I started in earnest in 2004, and I worked. I mean, I thought I had a good draft in 2008, but after getting some feedback, I sent it through the Odyssey critiquing service, which they're all genre. They have they do a lot of teaching through it, and a lot of big name authors teach through their program. And I mean, they're very prestigious, and they offered an editing service. So I had them edit it, and based on the comments I was getting from that, plus some other reader comments, I realized that I just really needed to do one more rewrite, and it was because of the ending of the book. People were not happy with the ending.
And the ending, as it was the same as it is in the script?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I thought the ending was so much stronger in this version.
Oh yeah, because I mean, and there were some people were offended by the ending. Other people thought it was too pedestrian. You know, I mean, it was just, I just knew that there was something wrong with the ending. So, you know, from those notes, and this had never come up in any of the movie with any of the film people. None of this has never, ever come up that I remembered anyway. So suddenly, when it was in book form, this was a problem. And maybe it was because of my writing, because my writing was so vivid.
You know what I think it is? I think it's that in a movie, you know, the story as it existed before, it can be told in sort of shorthand, you know, and it's like there, you know, you've got the evil character. You know, I think we know what we're talking about here, right? You got a character who's just clearly evil, and there's no two ways about it. I mean, what he does is evil, and there's not a lot of nuance to what happened, right? So in a film, especially in like Hollywood studio film, I don't think you're going to get a lot of objection from somebody who, you know, from a scene that's kind of written in shorthand like that, with shorthand characters, shorthand events. Whereas in a novel, you know, your reader is probably expecting something more nuanced and more dimensional than that.
Because it's very, very much so, you know, and so I realized there was something very wrong, and I said, you know, I'm just going to come up with a new ending. And I had been reading, I don't want to say a lot more crime novels, but I'd certainly been thinking more in terms of mysteries and thrillers, and I was thinking about the ending, and I said, and I hit on it, and I realized what it needed to be. And it needed to be something a lot more nuanced and something just so unexpected that, you know, it would be worthy of the library.
Right.
You know, something so horrific and so out there that you're not expecting. And then I realized what I could do throughout the book is, as I messed with this, was to plant red herrings. And to put in little clues here and there, and you know, because you know, I've had people say, "Well, I thought I had it figured out," and then I read the ending and went, "Oh my God, no!" You know, and at some point, even Dr. Farron thinks he knows, right? You know, and he's sure that he knows, and but you know, it's not that,
right?
And
this is gonna be a weird listening experience. You think it's this, but it's not that. Sorry folks, you gotta read it.
You gotta read it. So yeah, the ending is a huge surprise. But not to the point where you go, oh, there's no way. I mean, no, absolutely way. You know, it absolutely
yes way.
Makes sense. Yes way. You know, I wanted to avoid any Johnny explain it all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted to be so set up that when it happens, you're like, oh, yeah, oh, God, oh, no, yeah, okay.
Did we ever, actually, I'm not sure that we told people what the book is actually about. You sort of, like, what's the pitch for this story?
The pitch is Alicia Baum is missing a deadly childhood memory. And the memory is located in this place beyond death called the Library of Lost Childhood Memories. And the person who is the gatekeeper of this place is the librarian, Mr. Wicker. But he is a sort of sinister and seductive creature who has an agenda that's more deadly than the memory itself.
You've been preparing that. You've been working on that pitch, haven't you? On that synopsis.
I've known that pitch for months and months.
Very nice. Very nice. I have a question. I have a question now about the books. You know, they each have this is a really silly question, okay? But I couldn't help but think of it while I was reading it. They each have the name of the person whose memory it contains, right?
Right.
What happens if someone changes their name? Does the book
I believe
change?
It's the name. It's the name that was their original name.
Okay, so their birth
when
name.
they gave him I think it's their birth name.
Or the name that they had at the time of the surrendering the memory.
Yes.
Okay. I bet you never even thought of that, did you?
I didn't, but you know, the place is so, I've constructed it so, and I've thought so much about it.
It feels real.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that like I've gotten a lot of questions about it, and they just come right off the top of my head because the place is so real to me, and there's an internal logic to it.
Don't you ever wonder if maybe some of the more resonant stories resonate because they are real, and you know that there's some kind of like just adjacent reality that certain people, creative types, have the ability to channel? I don't know. That's maybe I'm just crazy, but that's something
I completely believe that, especially because of the way that I came to know about the Library of Lost Childhood Memories. That story is out there, but it has to be uncovered. At the end of my book trailer, there's a puzzle. And don't overthink the puzzle. You've actually seen that sequence of letters before. And once you solve that, it'll take you to some other puzzles that will unlock the full story of what the true but bizarre story of how I came to be inspired to write this book.
Oh, wow.
It's a really intense, it's a very intense experience that I had, and very bizarre and very, pretty life-changing in a way. And I decided that I never wanted to put that into an interview because it would rob it of its power.
Yeah, absolutely, right.
I wanted to put it out there, and you'll if you unlock that, and you'll get the full story, and it's told by me, and there's music, and there's this whole. It's very cool. It's this whole transmedia experience that I came up with, and I consulted with a couple of transmedia experts on the design, and
this is where your gaming background comes in handy.
Yeah, and with the transmedia storytelling, that's where that comes in, and so that to appeal to a whole different audience, and if they like it, if they get to the last puzzle, they unlock the last part of the story, and they like it, maybe they'll buy the book. I don't know, but they've gone through a really cool experience, and they've gotten a really cool story out of it, and so.
So now, did you mean her to actually be the what was it, the grand niece of L. Frank Baum, or was that like meant as a joke? Wait, let's see. I have it here. Great niece, twice removed. Yeah.
That was always kind of, well, in the short story, that was meant to just be sort of a wink. Mm-hmm. Because certainly she doesn't go to Oz.
Right.
And certainly, this is a much darker experience. But then I realized that, no, I could really talk a little in a sort of sideways fashion about writing and legacies and and all that kind of stuff. And I don't even really get into her background as a writer in this book. I mean, I have that all in my head, but I didn't really get into it. I do on my blog post. I did a meet my character blog post about her that listeners can find on my website. But I don't talk about her background that deeply in the book itself. I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah, that's true. I did notice that. So what would you say were the biggest challenges of turning this into a book for you?
Well, I think the prose itself was really difficult because, I suffered a lot of issues that a lot of screenwriters do when they start writing prose. I had the benefit of writing short stories first. I mean, I'd published a bunch of short stories. So POV wasn't a problem. That part was okay. But other problems like just letting things, like just the wordiness, just rambling on and on. I mean, the book I had written in 2009, I mean, I cut out like 15,000 words for Raw Dog. So, I mean, because I went in there and I went, oh, holy crap, why did it take 3 sentences to say what I could say in one sentence?
So in other words, just relaxing into it and not trying to just go for economy all the time like you do with screenplays?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but finding that balance,
right,
where you want to draw people in, you want to give them more information, but you don't want to get too flowery. I mean, it's like the big challenge was, what's the difference between poetic and purple? That was really hard for me because I knew I liked to kind of go there, but in a book, you don't just have free reign to just. So
you're saying your first time around, you overcompensated?
Yeah,
in
definitely.
The wordiness? Oh, I see.
Yeah, definitely. And so that was a big challenge. The other challenge, as we discussed, was the ending. But was finding what realizing that what worked in the screenplay, once it's all written out in detail and there, I mean, people, it doesn't work the same way. And some people might think, oh, well, that's a huge change. And in a way it is. But actually, once I realized what I wanted to write, it wasn't that much to go through and then rejigger things.
But if you were to go back and put it into a script again, I bet you wouldn't go back to the original version at the ending, right?
Not at all.
Right.
Now, I don't even know where I'd begin to put this back into screenplay version because of that history, the historical fantasy section. I mean, that's a movie in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of a sudden it becomes, like Game of Thrones or something, and it's just, it's huge.
It's huge. It's epic, and it's only 15,000 words, but it feels
epic.
Very different.
Right.
Yeah. And so and a lot of people, the reviews I've read so far, they usually, even the Publisher's Weekly review, called it a complex fairy tale. And I think that's fair to say. So it's kind of complex. I don't know how I'd be able to go back. And I think those were the two major challenges: was the ending and the prose.
See, that's the thing for me. I have such a hard time. Well, what about? All right, this is another. All right, let me just real quick. Let me get through this. I'm stumbling over my words here. I have such a hard time writing prose fiction in general because I'm so used to writing in the screenplay format, and I have such a hard time just letting go, relaxing into it, like you were saying, allowing the words to flow, because I'm always thinking, is there a shorter way I can say that, but also I've had a really hard time adapting scripts that I've written into prose form because of that, because I feel like the script was designed visually. It was designed to be told in visual form, and so I know that there are choices I made in telling the story that I would not make if I had written it as a novel first. It's hard to pick out which choices those are, and they always have effects on other things throughout the story, so it's organically a completely different beast. And I've attempted it and I've never done well with that. And then on top of that, of course, is the fact that unless you're going to really flesh it out as you have done here and come up with some new angles on things, it's really hard for me anyway to keep the inspiration going on a story that I've already told.
Right.
But you've...
Oh, no, absolutely.
But you've found some ways to approach the story with new angles, which I'm sure helped to energize you.
I've been haunted by this story for like 17 years because of that initial experience that I had. Mm-hmm. It was deeply haunting and profound. So, I mean, that's why, and it happened at the end of September 1997. So the book was published almost exactly 17 years after that experience. And, I mean, it really, really haunted me. So, I mean, if something has to really, there has to be something, an obsessive quality about it.
So do you feel like you've exercised it now?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I have ideas for 2 prequels and a possible sequel to the book, but, I don't have a burning desire to write them the way I did before this was published, because the main thing for me was I just wanted Mr. Wicker to breathe the air. Mm-hmm. I wanted him to have his, to be out in the world and then see what happens with him. But that was the most important thing. So yeah, I mean, depending on the inspiration, it could really drive you. Now, like at some point, I'm going to adapt my Mrs. Winchester script to novel for sure. I mean, because I'm totally freaking obsessed with Sarah Winchester, and that's been for a very, 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 over 20 years now. I've been obsessed with her, and that's not going to go away.
Yeah, so that's the likely follow-up, do you think?
No, actually, right now I finished the first book of a trilogy, a YA novel, a trilogy, and I'm totally obsessed with. I've never been obsessed with a story like I'm obsessed with. The first book is called Snowed, and the sequel is called Inversion. And the first book is about this 16-year-old engineering prodigy whose social worker mother brings home this mysterious boy named Aiden to live with them, to be fostered for the holidays. He's a runaway. And as they fall in love, this girl, her name is Charity, and this boy Aiden, they fall in love, and as soon as it starts to happen, she finds brutally murdered on the football field behind the bleachers her biggest bully at school. And shortly after that, they start uncovering these horrible animal deaths, these violent animal deaths. And so she and her Skeptics Club start investigating it, and they eventually find that, Aiden has this terrible family secret.
Oh.
And it threatens not just them, but the world as they know it.
Wow.
And yeah, so I feel very confident about it, because now what I'm getting from all the people who've read it is, oh my God, when is the next one going to be done? Oh my God, and if you go on my Facebook page, you'll see that anytime I talk about Snowed, the moms especially will go, I seriously can't wait.
Well, actually, this is a good segue into something else I want to talk to you about briefly. We're starting to wrap this up now, but
okay.
You've done a really, Erin, for those who don't know, my wife, she's often commented about how good you are at marketing your stuff on Facebook. I assume on other social media too, but I generally just use Facebook and a little bit of Twitter. And so you want to talk about that a little bit, like how you've managed to develop a good following, and talk about what you do to market it, or market yourself as a writer.
Well, when I guess it really started to hit me back when I was living in France. I lived in France for a year. I noticed I started to get a lot of people following my blog and interacting with me, that people, like all kinds of total strangers, because I was talking about something that was about me, but not about writing. And so I realized that if I had something interesting to say or something funny to say, then I could engage, I was engaging with people, and I also wasn't getting sick of myself, like talking about my stories or whatever, because a lot of writers will do that. That's like the only thing they'll talk about on their Facebook. And I guess once you're really super famous, that's all you need to.
But that's no way to develop a relationship with people, though, with followers.
No.
Right.
No, and so I decided that I just wanted to be very naturally myself, and to just sort of engage with people on whatever topics I felt passionate about or whatever I wanted to talk about. And every once in a while, so, oh, hey, look at this thing I got to be in, or hey, look at this thing I got to do, and isn't this cool? And and so I've been told that I have this very non-marketing marketing.
Well, you know what?
Approach.
That's exactly what that's like the modern model of internet marketing, where I forget. There's a famous internet marketer, and I can't remember. He's drawing a complete blank right now, but I'm sure everybody who's listening who knows anything about it knows his name. But he just published a book called Right Hook, Jab, or Jab, 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 Right Hook. That's it. Jab, 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 Right Hook. And that's the premise of it, is that 90% of the time you're just talking about real stuff. You're just being real. You're just connecting with people. And then, once you've earned that, maybe 10% of the time you're doing what might be interpreted as a pitch, but it's really just about building that relationship with people first. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about that, though, is I would imagine that a lot of the same stuff could apply. Remember filmmaking? That's kind of what this is about. But that a lot of the same stuff could apply with independent filmmaking. That the idea of building a following and building an audience and relationships with people, and self-publishing that as well, or self-distributing. So there, I did a little token. I brought it back around to filmmaking.
Some people kind of do that. Like, I follow James Gunn on Twitter, and he kind of does that a little bit. I think the people still who are best at it are the book writers, the authors. I still think they're better at it. And some, I follow a couple of agents who I just adore, and one of them said no to Snowed, but I still love her, so I just keep following her.
Nothing personal.
Because no, it's not personal. She and I've had all kinds of interaction, and they're just entertaining people. They're just interesting, entertaining people who I enjoy. And, and really, I still, even though I think of my Facebook and my Twitter as my professional, like when Brett has an aunt, an older aunt, who wanted to friend me on Facebook, and I was very hesitant about that, because I said, look, Aunt Kay, I swear a lot, and, this is my persona as, my horror author persona. I go, this is not how I would want to meet you, and we had not met in person yet. And she's like, oh, no, it's okay. Just add me. And it turned out it was actually fine. And when we met in person, it was like, we'd known each other forever, and it was really very lovely. But getting back to, I do notice that the people I know who are film people, other than Denise Gossett, who runs Shriekfest, she's lovely. A lot of people, the film people, just don't post, unless they have some film thing to post, or whatever. Right. The big exception to that is Alan Spencer, who's just freaking hilarious. If you're not friends with him on Facebook, oh God, I mean, he's magnificent. Alan Spencer, he did Hammer. He did Hammer in the 80s.
What, the show?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, that was his.
Oh, I didn't know that.
This fantastic show called Bullet in the Face.
That sounds really familiar. Is that
Eddie Izzard in it?
Yeah, it was a British thing, right?
No, he just happened to have Eddie Izzard in it.
Oh, it wasn't a British thing. All right. Now you're giving me homework.
A British thing.
So now I've got to figure out your puzzle at the end of your video. Now I got to make friends with...
I am Headmistress Maria giving you homework.
So I think All right, one more question for you. Okay, I know you said you
Okay.
wouldn't know where to start, but let's say Warner Brothers, somebody from Warner Brothers said, "We love Mr. Wicker. We want to option it. We want to give you the first crack at readapting it to a script." First of all, would you show them the original script?
No,
Okay. How would you?
absolutely
They
not.
say you've got 12 weeks to give us a first draft. What would you do?
Here's what I would do. I would script out the story, the current day story as is. I would keep the bones of it, as it was as a screenplay. And I would keep all those major beats, adding in, some of the stuff that happens with Dr. Stark.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff would be kind of sort of the same. And then what I would do is I would pitch the middle part as a special release, as a second feature.
Interesting.
That or mini feature that could be like that people could get online.
Very interesting. And would the script still be able to stand on its own without that expanded middle section?
Yeah, because there would be hints of it. We would know. We get some hints of it. So, I mean, we wouldn't tell the whole story. We'd tell part of the story, and he might give her some like high level dialogue about it as well. So, I mean, but I would pitch
or maybe
that
tell
as,
it in some kind of like impressionistic way, like in Bram Stoker's Dracula. I remember it was all done with silhouettes and you know, red and black and stuff. Something like that. Something impressionistic.
Yeah. So it would be either like really condensed, like you said, very impressionistic, or I would pitch it as just like this whole different experience. And maybe they do both. Maybe we do like the condensed version but then we blow it out as like this extra thing that people can buy.
That would be cool. Or at least be like a 20-minute film on the Blu-ray or something.
Yeah, exactly. So they could get this full experience. Because I think it would be extremely cool to have all of that. I'm just in love with that.
So you wouldn't say,
tragic.
sorry, I can't handle it. You wouldn't. I don't mean to imply you couldn't handle it, but I mean you wouldn't say, sorry, the novel is my definitive version. Either I'm not going to sell it or hand it off to somebody else to do a pass at it, right?
No, it's money.
Right,
and
right.
People and people. Well, if they see it, I mean, they might get interested in the book if they hear the book is a lot better.
Right.
That happens all the time. So it's not no skin off my nose if somebody goes and even does a bad job of it.
Right.
It's people always hear, oh, the book is better, so they go and they.
That's
read
just
the
what
book.
J.K. Rowling said when they about the Harry Potter movies before they made them. She said, "Hey, good books always survive bad movies."
Yeah, exactly. So I would take it. I would give it a shot. If they were willing to take a chance with me as the first draft, to do the first draft, I would certainly give it a shot. But that's how I would pitch it.
Cool.
Would be, we do this other thing. Or, I mean, because look at the money they give the Wachowski brothers to do things like, what was that film?
Well, now we
year?
got to say the Wachowskis now.
I'm sorry, the Wachowskis. I'm so sorry.
Right.
I apologize, Lana. I very much apologize. The Wachowskis, now they, look what they do. Look at that book that they adapted. I mean, and that was a really hairy book for them to adapt.
Cloud Atlas.
Yeah, Cloud Atlas.
Right.
Look at that. And so part of me kind of thinks, well, why couldn't we just do all of Mr. Wicker in its glory? Because look at Cloud Atlas.
Right.
That was huge and sprawling and much harder to follow than Mr. Wicker.
Yeah, and I mean, these days, it wouldn't. You can do these big sprawling things with CG and and just kind of a small set and you can give the impression of something really huge and get away with it.
Well, that's how I was. That's how I was. Pitching Mrs.
Right.
Winchester too. That house was constantly changing. Just use CG. Focus on just creating the few set rooms where the big action happens, and that's it. That's all you have to build.
Right.
So there is a lot of technology has really, opened things up for us, allowing us to tell stories that we couldn't tell before.
Right.
At least not with a bazillion dollars.
Well, Maria.
God, now I feel.
I was about
really
to tell you that I was about to tell you we're done, but then I ended up cutting you off. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I feel really terrible because I misgendered Lana. I feel super bad.
I can. Well, you know what? I actually want to leave it in.
I love her.
I want to leave it in because of your sincere. If you don't mind, of your sincere reaction to this. How. No,
I don't mind. I love her and and everything she's been doing for transgendered people, and she's amazing. So yeah. Yeah, it's old habits die hard, with gendering. It's a whole other issue. So, yeah.
Maria, thank you so much. We're going to cut it off here. And so thanks again, Maria, for a great conversation. The music that you heard at the beginning and that you're about to hear at the end here is by Jill Tracy. It's from the Mr. Wicker book trailer, which you'll be able to see if you go to the site anywherebuthollywood.com, and you can try your hand at the puzzle that appears at the end of the trailer. So if you'd like to know more about Maria or her work, you can visit her site, mariaalexander.net. And of course, her book is available, Mr. Wicker, is available at all the usual places. I highly recommend you pick up the actual physical hard copy of it because it is has a gorgeous cover, beautifully designed book. Thanks again for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. This is Adam Campbell for Anywhere But Hollywood.
Visit anywherebuthollywood.com and join the community. Fill out a profile, share samples of your work, search for collaborators by skill or location. Anywherebuthollywood.com, empowering the independent filmmaker.